a nutshell, Julian, if you would, can you summarize the releases of documents since the Collateral Murder video was released in the spring of 2010? For people who aren't keeping up on things, and even if you are an avid viewer of the media, or reader of the media, especially in the United States, they may know who Julian Assange is, the publisher of WikiLeaks, but actually what it is you've released, the substance of these documents. Could you just go through them?
Well, WikiLeaks has been publishing since 2007. We've published material from every country, almost every country in the world, and about every country in the world. We are now up to just over 8 million individual documents that we have released during that period. Now, the heat in the debate with the United States arose in 2010. We've had heated debates with other countries. We've had major court cases in the United States in relation to our fight with Swiss banks and so on. In 2010, the number of documents and publications that we were releasing, each one after another, ended up erecting a grand jury against us by the DOJ, National Security Division, and so we entered into a major media conflict with the US government. So going in order there, Collateral Murder, a documentary that we produced based on the tape from an Apache helicopter mowing down 12 to 18 people in Baghdad, including 2 Reuters journalists, and very clearly engaged in a murder. And the murder was an unarmed man, wounded, crawling in the gutter, and Good Samaritans came to rescue him. And all of them were killed, and 2 children came away with serious injuries. Then the Afghanistan war logs. Now these came at a very important moment in 2010, where Michael Hastings had just, the late Michael Hastings had just released a report on McChrystal. And these publications came not long after that.
This is the Rolling Stone journalist who
died in a car crash. And that shifted the debate about Afghanistan. Early in 2010, it was, what can we do to win in Afghanistan? After the Hastings article about McChrystal and WikiLeaks war logs, the result was there was no longer a debate about can we win in Afghanistan. It is how are we going to get out of Afghanistan. So that was quite an important shift. Then with the Iraq war logs, which we published in October 2010, which in some ways has been one of our best analytical works. We worked together with not just other media organizations, but a number of statistical organizations to work out what the kill count was for Iraq, combining with other figures, and we ended up with more than 100,000 civilian casualties. In fact, 15,000 new, completely undocumented civilian kills, and documenting US involvement and approval of Iraqi torture centers within the police, and many killings of civilians at checkpoints, and some political issues and so on. And that produced a number of inquiries and has fed into cases that have been taken by Iraqis that has now ended up with an ICC filing, International Criminal Court filing, against the British military. If we then move on, in December of that year, we started the release of Cablegate, and more than 251,000 US diplomatic cables from all around the world from 1966 to 2010. And that is the largest compendium of diplomacy that has ever been released. It's about 3,000 volumes of material. As a sort of history of how the modern world behaves in practice, it's extremely important, and it fed into the Tunisian revolution quite directly. In fact, Ben Ali's propaganda minister, after the government fell, said that the WikiLeaks releases about Tunisia is what broke the back of the Ben Ali system.
Because?
Well, because it exposed that the corruption that many Tunisians knew about, but in a much more flagrant form, of what money had gone where, and people keeping pet tigers and so on. but also that there was various kinds of debates about it, and within the United States and from others, and that when push came to shove, the US would probably back the military and not Ben Ali, and it was undeniable. So it wasn't just a Tunisian activist alleging this, it was a US ambassador writing back to Washington for several years. You know, the US had kind of let it go on, but documenting what had gone on, and that then made its way into Europe and affected the French support for Ben Ali, and the Tunisian activists became confident, and then 20 days later, Mohamed Bouazizi set himself on fire, and then he became the personified symbol of all the problems, and then it properly kicked off. But anyway, the propaganda minister and some others say this is what broke the back of the Ben Ali system, and those cables are really quite incredibly important. They have gone into literally dozens of court cases. They've released people from prison. People have been released from prison holding these cables above their head as the reason that they have been released from prison. The El Masri case, where the CIA kidnapped a German citizen unlawfully, renditioned him, and kept him in a CIA black site for 4 months. It was a case of mistaken identity. He wasn't even an alleged terrorist. He just happened to have the same name. And they then dumped him in Eastern Europe later on the side of the road, no explanation given, to try and make it look, to give him no evidence to take a case. And he did try and take cases in the United States, and this is something relevant, perhaps, what would happen to Edward Snowden in the United States. He was not able to get anywhere because the US government activated state secrets privilege, said all the things that the CIA had done to him were secrets, and they would not be revealing anything at all. He made a complete dead end. Then as a result of the release of the diplomatic cables, which spoke about what the United States had done with Macedonia, where he was taken from when he tried to enter into Macedonia, he was able to take a case against Macedonia within Europe and to the European Court of Human Rights, and eventually won, and there are 6 cables cited in the judgment, showing that it actually happened. Similar cases in Spain, and an important precedent was set about the use of our materials in court cases generally, specifically cables. So this relates to Chagos Islands. So there's an island group called Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. It's owned by the British. It is very important strategically because it's sort of on the way between things. Now, the British handed over rent-free one of these islands, Chagos, to the United States military.
C-H-A-G-O-S.
Yeah, to the United States military, and it has been now turned into a base, and rendition flights go through there and so on. But there was original inhabitants. At the time it was handed over to the United States, in the 60s, the original inhabitants were pushed off. And they were pushed off to Mauritius and Madagascar, and they had been trying to fight a court case to come back. Some cables revealed that in fact the British government told the US it was setting up a secret plan to make it very difficult or impossible for them to come back. It's going to declare, it's going to suck in the liberal left, and here's how it was going to do it. It's going to create a marine park. It's a coral atoll, the Chagos Islands. We're going to create a marine park. Well, what was the economy of the Chagos Islands? It was fishing. So it says explicitly that they're going to prevent the Chagos Islanders having any meaningful economic return to the island by creating this marine park, which all the liberals will love. And that way, these islanders won't be able to interfere or spy on the US base. Anyway, that provoked new litigation by the Chagos Islanders in the British courts. And ultimately, the lower courts found that the cables were inadmissible because they had come from embassies, and there's a Vienna Convention, the same thing that is protecting me here, that protects diplomatic correspondence. But in a higher court, it was appealed and was found that's not true. Actually, diplomatic cables published by WikiLeaks are not protected by the Vienna Convention. They're already public. It's the the first instance of getting them out that's protected, not what happens to them subsequently. So that's quite an important precedent within the common law world because it means these cables can be used in many more court cases.
The charge, Julian Assange, that you endanger lives when you release the unredacted documents that you do? Completely false. And it's not just me who's saying that. It's Associated Press who did an extensive review. It is the US government itself. In the Bradley Manning case, under oath, the head of the person who was responsible for investigating whether anyone had come to physical harm said under oath that they couldn't find a single person who had been killed or physically harmed as a result. You're talking about retired Brigadier General Robert Carr. He had a kind of war room dealing with the release of the WikiLeaks documents, is that right, back to 2010? That's right. Robert Carr and the Pentagon started up what they called a WikiLeaks war room, which had more than 150 people in it. DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, and FBI and others involved in trying to understand what we were going to publish, what we had, and what the effects were. And a lot of money was spent trying to check us in different ways. And the result of all that expenditure and understanding, and then the attempt to build up the Bradley Manning prosecution and to denounce our publishing efforts, which we had revealed that the US military documenting the deaths of more than 100,000 people in Iraq and Afghanistan, they found that 0 people had been physically harmed by our publication. Julian Assange, you just recently had a Twitter battle with Glenn Greenwald. It might have surprised some. You know, is the whole Intercept, the new online publication, releasing information based on Edward Snowden's documents around the NSA spying on whole countries. You felt that they should name the countries, not withhold any names. Explain what that was about. Well, I have a lot of respect for Glenn. Glenn has defended WikiLeaks from the attack by the US grand jury a long period of time, and he's been very brave in the Edward Snowden publications, and quite forthright. He left The Guardian in part because of that reason, because The Guardian was censoring the material that he was trying to publish. But he entered into First Look, and unfortunately, First Look is not just Glenn. First Look is actually the big power. All the money and organisation comes from Pierre Omidyar. And Pierre Omidyar is one of the founders, is the founder of eBay and owns PayPal and goes to the White House several times each year, has extensive connections with Soros, and can broadly be described as an extreme liberal centrist. So he has quite a different view about what journalism entails. For example, he has said this year and also in 2009 that if someone gave him a leak from a commercial organisation, not from the government, then he would feel it was his duty to tell the police. So that's a very different type of journalism standard that comes from Pierre Omidyar. And unfortunately, some of that, or perhaps a significant amount of it, has gone into First Look and created some constraints there. That was seen most disturbingly when First Look knew from the Edward Snowden documents that all of Afghanistan was having its telephone calls recorded, that the National Security Agency had corruptly installed mass surveillance inside Afghan telcos, saying to the Afghan government that they were installing this monitoring just for going after drug dealers. Not mass surveillance, but targeted surveillance after Afghan opium dealers. And in fact, they were recording the phone calls of every single Afghan. And that's as great an assault to sovereignty as you can imagine, other than completely militarily occupying a country, to record the intimate phone calls of every single Afghan citizen. And Afghanistan as a country and its people have the right to choose their own destiny, knowing what is actually happening to them. First Look decided that they would censor the fact that Afghanistan was having all its telephone calls recorded. They did say that the Bahamas were. But they said that they accepted the argument of the U.S. government that people could die as a result of revealing what was happening, or be threatened as a result of what's happening in Afghanistan.
Well, they were a bit mealy-mouthed with the original disclosure. Initially, they just said, we're not revealing it, and the reason we're not revealing it is credible reports that it could lead to an increase of violence. So it's structured as a kind of political statement that, well, if Afghanis found out about this, maybe they would riot or something. But we can take this from a number of different lines. My perspective is that's up to the Afghan people, just like it was in relation to the Arab Spring. If, knowing their environment and what is happening to their environment, they want to elect a new government, they want to roll the government, they want to expel people, that is a matter for that culture. It's a matter of sovereignty of how that country chooses to manage it itself. It's not a matter for other people to prevent a country from managing itself. But we can also look at just what is the reality. The US government always says this kind of thing. We've seen it for years and years, and it's always been baloney. Let's look at it. They've known for a year that Snowden has had that material. They've known specifically in relation to the country X was Afghanistan. They've known that for several weeks because First Look had in fact contacted the US government and were dealing with them. So if they had specific concerns about people in the US Embassy or something like that, there's plenty of time to have them removed. And then we also gave 72 hours warning that we would be publishing it.